welcome everybody to the Sunday Conversation. On our weekend update, there was I guess we'll call it a little saying by Roy Masters. Each day, your subjection to God is a free will offering of mind and body. In it, we exchange weakness for strength and doubt for faith. Roy Masters. Today, I was thinking, well, what will I talk about? And I thought about it, and I get these blanks. I'm like, okay, well, then I just have to be patient. Because you can't will an idea to come about. And so I had to release my will because I want it to be God's will and not my own will. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So my will is willful. It's a willful little cuss. And it says, give me this topic now. My wife says, what are you going to talk about? I don't know. I'm waiting. And then Chuck Williams says, there was a nice little saying in the weekend update, and there it was right there. How do we give up our will? You literally offer it. You put it on the altar of your Father in heaven and say, I offer you my will so that I can work thy will. And you have to just release it. We are holding on to our will, thinking we'll be nothing without our will. What would I be? I would be nothing if I didn't have a will. Well, not so. The reality is where there's a will, there's a way kind of a will, where you need to get a job done and you have to get yourself up and go do it, versus this willfulness that is from the pride and the ego. So what I've been learning to do in my life, I hope to express to you folks, which is to let go of my will, release the grasp on my own will, because I'm holding on to that will. I find that for years, the will is my will. That's not his will, it's my will. But what would I be without my will? And that's kind of the devil's trick, isn't it? What would you be without your will? You'd be a lot better off, that's for damn sure. Because then you would be free to do his will, his work, be his vessel. Because what are we but we belong to him. We are his. The problem is the devil whispers in your ear and says, you can be God. With your own will, you can be God. You can command the world. Look at the people. Look at the Faucis of the world and the Hitlers of the world. You see no humility in these people. It's pure will. And he says now, this Fauci, it's science. He's science. His science is all a big fat lie that he's trying to sell us. And he uses fear. And fear is clearly a tool of the devil. It's to make you not have faith in your Father in heaven, who has your back at all times. The problem is, because he's invisible to us, we can't see him. We can't see him with our naked eyes anyway. We see his works all around us, yet we can't see him. I see him all around me. I see him in every act that happens that is of his will. I need something to do a certain job. Somehow it miraculously appears. Miraculously appears. Where did that come from? I know where it came from. How did that happen? I know how it happened. If I let go of my will and truly desire to be a son of my Father in heaven instead of a son of a bee, if you know what I'm saying, then my life is just so much easier. Everything falls into place. My fear pokes its head up and says, well, what if? And then my courage says, it's okay, he's got your back. So I look at my dreams now. That's next, because I want to talk about my dreams. I don't have any dreams that I've written out. I don't have any dreams that I have that are just big dreams kind of in my own journal, you might say. I'd like to have a nice boat someday. I'd like to have a nice tractor someday. I have a nice tractor now. But I like to have these certain things someday. But I just let these things be known to the Father in heaven. And if it's supposed to be, it'll manifest itself somehow. A guy says to me the other day, hey, do you know anybody that wants a cabin cruiser? And I said, what? I said, I want a boat. He says, yeah, he just wants to get rid of it. He says, you can have it. It doesn't run. And I said, well, where is it? I'll go take a look at it. He says, I'll get some information and call you back. And I thought, well, maybe it's a big piece of junk. Maybe it's really not my dream. Maybe it's a big mess that I should, stay away from. But then again, maybe I'll go look at it. I look at life, and it's funny because sometimes when I say, I sure would like this, here it comes. Now, I have to look and see, where's that coming from? Who's that coming from? Is it God giving me what I'm asking for? Or is it the devil throwing something in front of me to distract me from my job? So we have to be sharp all the time, aware, conscious, because the devil will also try to tempt you with things, your dreams that you want. So I looked at that and I thought, very interesting. You know how the internet works right now and social media. If you want something and you talk about something with one of your friends, these smartphones are listening to you. And the next thing you know, there's an ad for whatever it is that you wanted. How does that happen? It's because it's artificial intelligence, right? Artificial intelligence and algorithms that are picking up certain keywords and things. And if you start searching or start looking at certain things on the phone, it'll also feed you those things. If you're looking for boats, the next thing you know, every other advertisement will be for boats because this artificial intelligence. And they also, the comment was made, they also censor you with that too, and that's correct. So the interesting thing is artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence. What a strange thing. And that's really what Satan is. He's not the intelligence that God gives you, the intuitive intelligence. It's an artificial intelligence to feed the ego, to build the ego, to make the ego more of a god, to give you what you want. That's why dreams are very interesting. When you have a boat of your dreams, a car of your dreams, or whatever you might want to say, that all of a sudden becomes your aim. And it takes your aim off of being closer to your Father in heaven, which is very interesting. So as I refocus my aim, my dream, to be closer to my Father in heaven, all of a sudden, I start to become sharper on life. And I start to see all these tricks and all these games. And then all of a sudden I realize I don't want anything in this world anymore. I want to be closer to my Father in heaven. And then my whole life starts changing. My aim is different because what you aim for, you may get. If you're shooting at something and you're aiming at it, you may end up shooting it, right? You may end up getting it. So my aim is no longer for things out in the world. I'm not aiming for that and then approaching it and trying to have it and own it. I'm now my aim is to be closer to my Father in heaven. And I've been saying that a lot lately. And I hear myself saying that a lot lately, and I think, good for you. Good for you. If your aim is to be closer to your Father in heaven, what are you willing, Alan, to give up to be closer to your Father in heaven? The first thing has to be the will. I've said this before. The will is the Antichrist. The will, your very own will. Because through your will, you can be manipulated by your dream boat, which takes your aim off of God, by a car, by a male or female person you're attracted to. All of a sudden, your aim is to get that person, to get that thing. None of those things are what God wants for you because God would bring them right into your life as easy as possible. You can't even imagine. I'll give you an example of my wife. I kept asking my Father in heaven when I was a young man to bring me a good wife. I said, I want a good wife. And so all these girls came into my life and I was like, nope, that's not the one. Nope, that's not the one. And it was always the question to the Father in heaven. And then when Jan walked through the door, something inside of me said, that's the one. Something inside of me now. I know what that something is. And my Father, speak it into my heart. Here's your wife to be. This is the one. And I knew it. And then you know what? I let go of all the other questions about, is this the one? No, this is the one. I know this is the one. Now I must honor this person. So we went out for 4 years, had a proper relationship, and ended up getting married. And you guys know the rest. Here we are 40 years together almost. And let me tell you, it's been trials and tribulations. But the question always comes back to, not the question, the fact comes back to, this is the one that you gave me, Lord. This is the one that I will honor till the day I die, Father. And thank you. And I come back to, thank you, Father, for giving me this woman, this person to live my life with. And so in my life, she has been the one person that always brings me back to myself, brings me back to the man I'm supposed to be through, even if it's an argument, a fight, or whatever. It isn't she that is bringing me back. It is she that is standing in contrast to what I want, and her saying, perhaps, no. A lot of us know a friend that had some problems lately with another person that we know, that they had an improper relationship. And it came down to, I had a conversation with this person. I said, your job in that moment when temptation was standing in front of you was to say, hell no. Because when there's two of you, it takes two to tango. So with my wife, there have been times when she says to me, hell no. But in all of our relationships, when there's two of you out in this world, if you are both weak, then you both fall together. If one is strong, then you both rise to a new level. Because the one that is strong will say, hell no, not today, Satan. And so for all of us, when we are together with each other, whether you be husband and wife or just friends, or even just standing with somebody in a coffee shop, and that's your chance. Those chances come to you throughout your day, every day, to take advantage in some little way. Take advantage of somebody in some little way, and you either say to yourself, hell no, not today, Satan.
How do you say hell no to Satan and not make it egotistical?
I think everybody has to ask that question to themselves. With me, it is my intent. In my life, my intent right now is to say no as much as I can to any of these temptations in my life that I used to just let slide by.
But isn't there a danger that in trying to be good, that you try to be good with your pride? You're going to be the best this, you're going to be honorable, you're going to do everything right, but you're doing it with the wrong part of your nature. Aren't we supposed to be totally helpless? And somehow our Father comes in and changes the chemistry?
I believe that too, okay? But in my case right now, I see things, they approach me, and I look them right in the moment, I might say. I guess because you can't look a situation in the face. But I look right at it and say, hell no. And I just make that choice.
Well, what it seems to me is what you're saying is I'm way more conscious of things that I wasn't before.
That's exactly it.
It's a growing process.
And I'm at that stage of my life where I don't know how to tell you guys. It's like I am a completely different human being than I was a couple of years ago. Completely different. I look back at my life and I go, where is that guy? And I think, I don't want to be that guy anymore. And so I'm just looking at all these little interesting things. My wife says to me, and we go back to the boats, why are you looking at all these boats? I go, I don't know. It's just kind of fun. Am I tempting myself? Am I supposed to buy a boat? I don't know.
Your dad liked boats?
My dad did like boats, and she said the same thing to me. And I grew up on boats, and it could be that I'm just yearning to be able to go out on the boat with my dad again, because that was where a lot of my youth was out on the boats. But every time, like I think I might have told you, I was looking for a boat, and there was like a 30-footer, and then it turned into a 50-footer, and then it was 100 feet. I thought to myself, hell no. I kind of needed to go down that road for just a moment. And I was like, where did that come from? But that's like surfing, right? Here comes the wave. You catch a wave. The wave will take you right into the rocks if you're surfing in the wrong direction. Because you can surf to the right and you can surf to the left. I don't know if you know this or not. But you can surf right into the rocks or you can surf away from the rocks. That's just surfing. I looked at the whole situation and I thought, why was I entertaining this ridiculous 100-foot yacht that you have to have a captain and a crew? Owning the boat is a $150,000 a year thing, and then you have to have a dock to put it on, which is another $50,000. All of a sudden, just the reality, the sheer stupidity of the whole thing became clear to me, and I just said, hell no.
I'm wondering this, because this just came to me. People looking for things to escape into because they don't feel fulfilled because they've been escaping all their life, so they find a material thing to feel it, and then when you get it, you find out, well, what's the big deal? The thrill is gone.
So it's funny because all the boats that I've ever owned, I've always made money on them. I've always bought these boats, just like things. I buy them and use them a couple times. Or I bought a boat down at the Oregon coast, a speedboat that's clearly made to go in a lake. What's it doing on the ocean side of this state? And I looked at it and it was $4,000 and I thought, gosh, that's a good deal for that boat. So I bought it and I kept it. I think it was about 10 years and I sold it for $8,000 or $9,000. 10 years of use later. So the boat actually paid me to own it. That's the way my dad taught me to own things. That they don't own you, you own them, and then they pay you to take care of them, which is an interesting thing. And the same with cars and properties. And my whole job has changed from being this personality on the radio, which I think is going away slowly but surely. And I actually thought that this morning. I thought, will I give up my old life completely to where I don't have to be that personality that I've been for the last 30 years? It is, she says, it'll give you up, and it is giving me up. It's exactly right. Good point.
Well, a couple things. First of all, do you say hell no or not? To me, it's more of, am I going to partake of that or not? You do have a choice to step into something. And the other thing is, I wonder what it was like for Adam and Eve before they fell. Did they have a will? It must have been a will that made the choice to do the wrong thing. What was their will like before they sinned? Was it just a submitted will to the Creator, and so everything they did was in line with Him? I'm not sure if it's the will itself that's evil. It's the unsubmitted will, because you're going to submit to one or the other. So we're going to yield to one or the other. So anyway, it's just something I thought about as you were talking.
Right at the end of this walkway is the street. The other day we were going to go across the street, and we walked out to the street, and there was a bumper sticker on the back of this car. It said, "Not today, Satan." And I thought to myself, my dad talks about the little dicky bird that can tell you something, right? I thought to myself, there it is. Not today, Satan. I thought, that's exactly kind of the attitude I have to have, because I think many of us, get caught up in the fantasies of the mind. Ooh, I could have that nice boat. I could have that nice fancy house. I could have that fancy car. And now I've had all of them. And just like all people of wealth will tell you, the wealth does not give the happiness. It's living the right life, doing the right thing, following your conscience, having a proper relationship with your Father in heaven. That's what gives you happiness and joy. So to me, anything that tries to pull me away from that is Satan trying to pull me into his world, the world of things. He who dies with the most toys wins, right? I told you that before, that's kind of the game of the, I don't know, how do I say, the wealthy people in this world have the nicest houses, nicest cars, and they show off to each other. Come and look at my car collection. And then I've been to people's car collections before, and I look around and I go, wow, this doesn't really give that happiness or joy. They get happiness by having people at their car collections saying, oh, you're so lucky, right? Building that ego. As soon as the people are gone, it's just a bunch of things to take care of again. Like Jay Leno, as a matter of fact, has a huge car collection. He has no children. He says, I don't have kids, so these cars are my kids. And I thought to myself, I'm so glad I have kids. I'm so glad I have kids, because I get joy from my kids even when they're bad, because I think, oh, here's an opportunity to help them through this difficulty by sharing some wisdom with them. And then I have to let them go and go make their mistakes. And maybe they come back and go, you were right, Dad. And like I used to do with my dad, he used to tell me, yep, you're a bloody fool. You shouldn't go do that. But you're going to have to learn the hard way, aren't you? And I'm like, yes, of course I am. And I'd come back and go, okay, you were right, Dad. And then at one point, I want to tell you, this is a funny thing. I said to my dad, don't say it, because it'll come true. Don't say it, whatever. No. And sure enough, he would say it, and sure enough, it came through. Dang it.
You said something about Satan trying to tempt you away or pull us away, but the truth is, he's already got his clutches in us in certain areas that we've yielded to in the past. It's already there. And that's what has to be worked out. It's already there.
That's right.
Well, I think we've all said, I wish I had a lot of money. But every time I say that, I think that's not true. That is not my wish.
That's exactly right. Although I wish I had a lot of money. I mean,
That thing, hell no, Satan, hell, saying hell no. I mean, I've had an instance in my life when I was younger, and the person who introduced me to your father and the meditation when I was a little drug addict, and it changed my life, well, he ended up making a sexual advance on me, and I was young. He was like a mentor for me. So I didn't allow it to happen, but it was just natural for me. I just rebuffed it, it was in the night, and it wasn't even a thought. But then the next morning, I had a bunch of thoughts trying to rationalize what he did. Well, he did it because he was tempting me to see if I would fall. This whole slew of stuff, and it had happened to the gentleman that you were talking about earlier. When we don't naturally stop the evil and don't take that step, then the devil will use excuses, etc. And it took me a little while to see the reality, and then I just blew up at him, which wasn't right, but it was better than going along, and then I left. And then I had to see that, that it wasn't, I didn't handle it right, but it was better than going along with it.
I want to just clarify the hell no, Satan. Because I don't actually go, hell no, Satan. It's more of a posturing in my soul at this point. When temptation comes, whatever it is, cookies, donuts, boats, cars, whatever that temptation is, I have to build a wall. I have to say, I'm not going to allow myself. I'm going to, I shouldn't say it that way because that's kind of a will. I'm just going to, right. I'm just going to make sure that when I see temptation, I'm going to call it out for what it is. Hell no, Satan. Hold on.
Kids will see the hypocrisy in their moral parents, and their rebellion against that will make them appear to be immoral. But they're fighting the hypocrisy, and the moral parent refuses to admit it.
Yes. Again, coming back to, with my children, when I saw them doing things that I felt was immoral, I said, hell no. And I drew a line. I'm drawing that same line with myself. You know the old saying, do as I say, not as I do? Well, I don't want to do anymore. So now I'm going to live that life. And you know what? Every now and then I'm going to fall and have, a cheeseburger or whatever. I'm not saying it's a big fat sin to do this, but when you start indulging in food or indulging in thought, indulging in fantasy about a car, about a person, whatever it is, you are falling to temptation. And I'm calling it for what it is. Not today, Satan. It's almost, I'm gamifying it just a little bit because I call it out for what I see it is, which is Satan trying to pull me down.
I just wanted to respond to what Fabian said, which was really interesting, is that this mentor who led you to something that helped save your life then tried to violate you and take advantage of that relationship. And that is going to confuse anyone, because here's a person that's leading you to the truth, but then they slip in the lie and they try to take advantage. And I think I don't know about you all, but I've had that in my life where I've looked up to somebody and then I see things that aren't lining up, or somebody that even was like a mentor or something. And it took me a long time to reconcile that, you know what? No man is perfect. I align with what I align with, and I don't align with what I don't align with, no matter who it comes from. And it doesn't mean the person is good or evil. They're just a human being, and we're all on that road, and we have to not connect a person to what is right. It's like you have to have that. You shouldn't doubt yourself just because a person did something good for you in your life.
I was confused.
I will clarify, is that if you have somebody in your life, like Fabian did, who brought him to Roy and helped him figure out his life. And then this same person was trying to commit a sin with him, okay? You sort of develop a bond, a little bit of a bond with somebody when they help you. And that's what groomers do with children. They're very kind to them, they do things for them, and then they take advantage of them. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I've had mentors in my life where then there would be certain things that didn't align with the truth inside of me, and it confused me.
So my dad would say, if you put somebody on a pedestal, they'll surely urinate on you.
But what I realized out of that was just to not doubt my own inner compass. That's all.
Or do not judge the person good or evil. You have to be in this place where you see and observe, but don't step into the judgment.
So interestingly enough, I've heard my dad say that. I thought to myself, why would he say that? Don't put it on a pedestal, they'll surely urinate on you. And it's funny, we all laughed about it, but it's the truth. You put somebody on a pedestal, it's wrong. You should not have anybody in your life on a pedestal. And this is why my dad closed down the actual church on Evelyn Street 25, 30 years ago, because he felt too many people were putting him on a pedestal. Listen, this is a journey for each and every one of us to become closer to our Father in heaven, not somebody here on earth.
The Spirit of truth, the Holy Spirit, our intuition inside of us that lets us know when something doesn't sit right with us. It creates confusion. The word confuse means to try to blend two things that can't be blended. We get confused when we see this truth in somebody or we thought was true, and then they have an action that doesn't sit right with what they say. The hypocrisy, right? The hypocrites, the stage actor. And that creates a confusion within us until we understand it. Now, we shouldn't judge anyone because we know we're not judged, right? Once we come to this realization, have the Spirit of truth that we resonate with inside of us, we see our own faults and our actions that are actually not ours, right? This is the sin. This is what's keeping us from getting closer to our Father. And when we see that in ourselves and we don't identify with it anymore, or we don't identify with the stage actor, we identify with Christ, who is in the Father, the right hand of the Father. When we identify with that, then we can see people's actions and we go to a state of empathy towards it versus a state of anger or a state of reaction. We're no longer emotionally reacting from what they're doing because we're not saying, hey, this person is this. We see that exact same torment that we have dealt with or we're still dealing with. And it lets us be empathetic. And actually, all we're supposed to do is we're supposed to love and to pray. That's it. We don't need to go around and explain ourselves to people or explain our relationship with God because it does no good anyways. Everyone's relationship with God is individual to them, and everyone's at a different place in their lives at all points. And all we can do is love and intercede. That is the only thing we can do. And love is patient, and love is kind and understanding and slow to anger. And there's only one thing I've ever seen in this entire book that God gets angry at, and that is the sin. We are temples. That's what this vessel actually is called, in the Hebrew language, called a Merkabah. It's a temple of God, is what it is. And so when we see things and we're shown things by the Spirit of truth inside of ourselves, the more light we let in, it shows us more cracks. And we should be angry almost with those things. What did Christ do to the moneylenders inside the temple? He didn't ask them to leave. He drove them out. He got rid of them. He told them to leave because they don't belong in his Father's temple. That sin, that darkness inside of us does not belong there. We need to drive it out. We need to let God drive it out, which we have to humble ourselves and first be aware of it and then accept the gift that God has given us, which makes us be even more humble to accept a gift. We all like to give. Giving is easy. Serving is easy from the right point, but to accept this beautiful gift is very difficult at first. But the more we see, the more he'll show us. We just need to love and to pray for each other, and that's it. That's really all that it is.
So I see that judgment is clearly a sin. Back to the ego, because if we want to be gods, we have that ego and that pride, and so what do? We become the judge. And so we judge, and when we're judging others, like, look at that jerk, or that guy's a real jerk, or whatever that judgment is going to be. You know, you could even say, that person is so prideful. Where you could maybe go up to that person and say, hey, maybe a couple minutes we could pull off to the side here and have a conversation and maybe tell them. Most people aren't open to it, but you never know. So the ego, the pride, the will, it's all making yourself the God, and the judgment is the sin against the one true God. Hang on one sec.
I agree with most of what you said, but we do have to be careful about using any kind of anger energy to, try to evict that spirit in us, because the instance also in the Bible where Jesus, they were in the Father's house, the temple, the outer Father's house, making money and ripping people off. That was an extreme situation. And also it doesn't say that he was angry. He just took care of business. So, I know with me, any application of my own kind of trying to save myself doesn't work. I see it and let the Spirit do it, and it's doing it. But I've tended to try to do it myself, try to help, God's throwing out that lifesaver, and I'm trying to help him throw it, and it just hasn't worked in my life that way.
I want to tell you guys a story about a similar situation that happened to me. Fabian said that he wasn't angry, he just took care of business. I got a phone call one day from one of the tenants here at the plaza, and there was a person that was acting inappropriately. And I said, I'll be right down. And so I understand it struck a chord with me when you said that, Fabian, because I wasn't angry. I just took care of business. I saw somebody doing something wrong here on the parking lot that needed to be dealt with, and I literally just came down and said, you're going to have to leave this property. I wasn't angry. I was just firm. And the person, of course, immediately obeyed what I said. So there is a way of looking at that inside of you and saying, not today, Satan. You don't have to say, not today, Satan. You literally just have to see it for what it is and take care of business. When you become more conscious of these dark things that rise up in you, you just look at them and say, not today. Almost, you don't say those words. You literally, you just look at it and yeah, it fizzles. And just the same way that I said to the guy, you'll have to leave. That's kind of how it is. You'll have to leave, evil, because you're not going to have me today.
Ephesians chapter 4, verse 26 says, be angry, but sin not. Let not the sun go down upon your wrath.
The journey that we all take from becoming, we're innocent as a child, and then we become angry and we become rebellious. And then we get to that point where we say, this is wrong. I got to find my way back. And then we start getting into the word, you might say, and we start thinking, what is this power? What right do I have to use this power of our Father in heaven, the strength? Is there abuse of it? Do I keep everything bottled up inside? Then there's other people like Dave who says he regrets kind of opening his mouth because he showed a side of him that he had always kept a little bit secret. The reality is this type of conversation is very healthy because we're all seeing little bits of ourselves in each other, and we're seeing bits of the journey that each one of us has to take to find where we are today. But if we judge each other, it doesn't do any good because we're hurting ourselves. So you all have a chance to judge each other each and every day. And when we have these meetings on Sundays, you have a chance to judge each other or to look and say, I'm glad I saw that in that person. I see it in myself. And I've had so many letters from people that say, bring back the advice line, bring back the advice line. Because my dad would talk to people about their problems, admonish them on the air where it's for the world to hear. But see, they weren't looking at the faces of anybody else because they're on a phone. So they're still kind of by themselves, one-on-one with Roy Masters. But the reality is they had millions of people hearing about their problems. The amazing thing about that radio show for the last 55 years was that people were getting helped that weren't on the phone. They were listening to somebody else, learning something, somebody else suffering in some way, and somebody trying to hold a lamp under their feet. That's all this is all about. But if we judge each other, then you don't learn that day. You walk away with some other spirit instead of the one you're supposed to walk away with.
Be courteous to one another and tenderhearted, freely forgiving one another, even as God, for Christ's sake, freely forgives you. Now, the liar can't create anything. He only can manipulate and twist the energies of God. Okay, he doesn't have his own energy, he doesn't have his own power. One of the biggest tricks I think we see in this world is man's love of logic and being able to reprogram his brain so he doesn't feel any of God's energies or frequencies, becoming a robot, or Roy-bot as Roy would call them. And this is dangerous, extremely dangerous, and the Bible has a lot to talk about it. You're disconnecting from your spirit, or the Spirit of God himself. I'm sorry, but if you see, let's say this is going to be graphic, but if you were to watch a child be raped in front of you and you don't feel anything inside you, it doesn't make you angry or nothing, there's something wrong. That is a sociopath that doesn't have any feeling at all. They've destroyed and disconnected themselves from their spirit. And that is very dangerous.
And I think a lot of us get angry at the injustice we see in the world, in the political world, obviously. When it starts to affect your bank account, usually, is when you really get angry. Because if it doesn't affect you, you could say, well, as long as it doesn't affect me, I don't care what you do. Well, the reality is we do have to care what other people do. Look what's happening in this crazy LBGTQ+++ world. I mean, it's like if we couldn't call that wrong and speak it out loud back then when we had the right to say, that's wrong, that's weird. Well, today you can't say that or you'll be canceled. They're taking away our ability to even speak the truth. These algorithms we talked about earlier in this conversation, the artificial intelligence, not only does it feed you what you want and desire, it keeps you from hearing the truth in the same reverse algorithm. In other words, it gives you what you shouldn't have and takes away from you the truth of what you should have.
I'm reading a really good book now. It's called Speechless by Michael Knowles, and he's been on YouTube a lot. He's the most clear-thinking person I've ever met. And he made a very interesting point. If you allow them to frame the language, then they'll got you. Remember, it used to be called global warming, and then didn't fit enough, so they changed it to climate change, which, oh, hell yeah, I mean, you got 4 of them going, you know. If they can get away with that, and they'll do it little by little, or eventually they come to that point where in 1984, and he says, slavery is freedom, and the lie is the truth. Pretty soon, if you keep at it, you can get to that point. Not right away, but if they keep hammering away our language like that, you're going to start talking like that because it's accepted.
So there's a satire site called Babylon Bee, and the CEO of this Babylon Bee was on Dan Bongino's show on Fox News the other night, and he had him on because so many of the things that he made fun of, one of them was that Legos made a like a non-binary version of Legos because the Lego is a male and a female piece that fits together. Okay, and so they made kind of a satire joke about now they're going to make Legos that are not male or female, but the problem is but how can it fit together? It won't work. And then the next thing that happened is there was somebody that actually checked, a fact checker to check it, and they found out that it was satire, but then Lego came out and actually said they're going to make these Legos that are like not male or female, if you know what I'm saying. And he went on to say that the world is so crazy right now that all you have to do is make up something crazy, put it out there, and the next thing you know, not too long from now, it'll come true. And then he talked about something else that happened in like 2017 that came true, and there was a number of different things that had come true on a site that actually makes things up that are funny. But that is how crazy our world is today. All these things because we sat comfortably in our houses and said, well, as long as those people do whatever they do in their own house, they can do whatever they want behind closed doors. That's their... No. What's right is right. What's wrong is wrong. And there's only one judge, and it's not me, but I do know I can discern what is right and wrong, and I can discern what is weird and what is not weird, what is immoral and what is not immoral. We can make these choices, and you know what? We are now being silenced. We cannot really speak up and say, that's weird. Pretty soon, you'll have things where it used to be illegal to have sex with animals, and All I can tell you is a satire site, they make fun of that, and they're going to try and make it legal. He says it's already legal. It has been in Washington for, wow.
Okay, we see all this stuff in the world and we see that it's totally mad. So what I'm going to say here is, when is that going to be all blown up? God's got to come back, straighten everything out, right? So in other words, he's got to come back because people are nuts. And the average person that has any common sense can see all this, and the other ones are following and being led astray. So it's like Sodom and Gomorrah all over again.
Narrow is the path and few that shall find it. And unfortunately, we are all going to witness horrors, because as this continues to go farther in the direction that it's going, south is what was said in the background, absolutely, we can tell our friends and we can use social media the best we can, but you'll probably be silenced. We can use the radio show to keep on having people talking about it little by little. Each time, every day we try to do something on it on the radio. Jan and I just watched something with Dr. Zelenko the other day, which was just brilliant. He was on Alex Jones. It was hard to watch when Alex Jones was talking, but Dr. Zelenko, everything he said made perfect sense. And he even said, where have we heard said, take your children out of the schools? My dad's been saying that forever. I mean, I left school because, and this was 1978, 77, because my dad says, you're learning nothing at that school. You'd be better off just becoming a plumber or just getting a trade. And I said, I want to go to trade school. Let me go to ROTC. And he says, okay, but as long as you go to school to learn, he says, because this school that you're going to now is not teaching you anything. I want you to learn a trade. He says, and if I find that you're goofing around, because he would have to be at work all day, he says, I'll put you in the military school. I said, well, I want to go and learn how to work on cars. And so I did. I dropped out of high school. And what's funny is it was the best thing I ever did. I was with a young guy the other day, 15 years old, and I said, what have you been doing? He says, just going to school. I said, school sucks, doesn't it? He said, yes. And I said, it isn't that school really sucks. It's the learning part you're supposed to learn. That doesn't suck, because when you go and work with somebody that teaches you a trade, that's fun. But the school dumbs you down. Unfortunately, the public schools are designed to take your drive away. And you become this broken person, because a young person, when they're just growing, when they're of age in their teen years, they're hungry to learn. And what do? They teach them a bunch of crap that they don't really need. If they were just to go to work with a carpenter or a plumber, they would have to learn to measure things and numbers and add numbers and subtract. They would learn all the things that they probably need in their life. And then if they got really interested in something else where they weren't learning it from the plumber or the contractor or the auto mechanic, they can go on the internet and learn anything. You can learn it in a moment, watching a video on how to. The problem is the devil's in the details, because they will get distracted, unfortunately, into some perverse thing that'll pop up when they are trying to learn. This is a perilous world we live in. And so we have to guard our children with everything we have. Putting them in school right now, boy, it's a dangerous thing. You're handing them off to Satan's tribe. Somebody said, what would you do if there was somebody smoking in the pot in the back of the building? And I said, I would call the authorities. And my mouth said authorities, and I went, why are they an authority? I would call the police. They're the people that are supposed to protect us from people doing unlawful things. But the word authority is such an interesting word, isn't it? Why are they the authorities? Well, maybe they're authority on law and what's legal and what's not legal in that situation. But I thought to myself, that word authority has been rolling around in my head like a ball on a roulette wheel. Authority, authority, authority. Fauci says he's an authority. He's an authority on science, but he's lying to us. He's literally lying to us. Is he an authority, or should we question authority? We should simply question authority. Somebody wanted to say something.
There's a lot of really wicked authorities and that they're driving this thing. But I loved hearing your story about the school where you didn't want to undress in PE, because, man, I could relate to that. I didn't have, I mean, you had a father who would go down there 65 miles and save you. Most kids don't have that. And I ended up having to get naked and getting packed in like sardines, after PE, and it was crazy. It felt so uncomfortable, always did.
He's talking about last week's show. I talked about a story about when I was 13 years old in 7th grade, and I was supposed to undress in front of all these people. And it's worth repeating because even hearing myself tell the story, I said to my brother David, he's 6 years older than me, I said, "Did you know that happened to me?" He says, "No." And what happened was, when I was 13 years old, I went to 7th grade where they would dress out for PE. And you'd have to, as a guy, you have to put a jock strap on and all these things. And it was so humiliating to get out. You're getting naked in front of all these other people, and a 13-year-old boy and a senior who's now like a man growing a beard. I felt like I was in some kind of strange hell. All these naked people all over the place. And so I thought, I'm not dressing out. I'm not going to do it. So the coach came in and he says, "Masters, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm not changing my clothes unless I can use a bathroom, change my clothes privately." He says, "Masters, take off your clothes, change out." I said, I'm not going to. That's not how. Yeah, my wife's, "Hell no, Satan." I didn't know enough to say at that time, but I wasn't going to. There was nothing in the world that was going to make me take my clothes off in front of all these people. And he gets real in my face and he says, "Masters, take your clothes off now." And I said, "No, I'm not gonna." And I ran. I ran, and I was fast at 13 years old. That guy couldn't catch me. He was like 6'3". And so I went up to the principal's office and called my father, who was in Los Angeles, and we are in Ventura, which is 65 miles away. He says, "Don't you move, I'll be right there." He got in his car and he drove all the way back from LA to Ventura, and he came in the office, and my dad, as you guys know, is about 5'7", and he says, "Where's this teacher?" And so we marched down to the gymnasium, and behind the gymnasium was the locker room, and this guy was in his desk, sitting there doing some paperwork, and my dad says, I just remembered his name, "Are you Mr. Peterson?" And he says, "Yes, I am." He says, "You intimidated my son, Alan?" And the guy stood up, and he's this big, tall man. Of course, my dad was not afraid of anything because he was a martial arts expert. And he says, "He has to change out like all the other kids." He says, "No, he doesn't." He says, "He's not going to do anything he doesn't want to do." And he says, "You tried to tell him to take his clothes off." And he says, "You intimidated my son and pressured my son." And he says, "He has to change out like all the other kids." And my dad walks right up to the guy, right in his face. He says, "No, he doesn't. What are you going to do about it?" And the guy says, "Well, he can't go to school here then if he's not going to change his clothes." He says, "The problem is you intimidated my son. You pressured my son. You're wrong for doing it." He says, "Why don't you try that on me? Try your trick on me." And my dad was right in the guy's face, and the guy did not know what to do. And I kind of remember at that point, the guy backed off, and I got to use his private bathroom to change my clothes for a couple of weeks. But this guy was still trying to be intimidating to me, constantly making fun of me. So I ended up changing schools. But I watched my father stand up to this guy, and it was the way, of course, when there's no one there to protect a young kid, there's a certain evil that comes out of an adult towards an innocent kid. He was trying to destroy my innocence, and I wasn't going to have it. And then my dad had his attorneys put together a pamphlet called Law in the Schools. And my dad says, "You read this, and you keep it with you at all times." And so when I went to this new school, I didn't really have any problems because I knew that my dad had my back. And what I really learned is that is how God is also for us. God has got your back if you put your faith in God. And if you know what is right from what is wrong, and when somebody tries to impose wrong on you and you simply stand your ground and say no, who's got your back? God's got your back. The problem is we try to figure out intellectually what will happen. And when you step away from God and go into your intellect and say, well, if I don't do this, then this could happen, then you're stepping out of God's realm, God's protection bubble, God's bubble of possibilities, you might say. So I went to school for the rest of the years until it happened to me again towards the end of my junior year in high school. I was a water polo player and I was on the varsity team. And I had missed a couple of times because I was taking care of, we had a couple of goats and some baby cows and chickens, and I had to go back to the little farm every day and make sure that the animals were fed. And sometimes something would happen and maybe an animal would die and I'd have to deal with it or whatever, and I would miss my water polo practice. And there was a coach that had that same spirit, that dominating, wicked, emasculating spirit as this coach that I had when I was in 7th grade. But this time I was well armed. And I happened to be wearing my Letterman's jacket because I was a Letterman water polo player, varsity. And the coach says to me, if you miss practice one more time, you're off the team. And I was part of the starting 7 varsity water polo team. So I didn't want to be off the team. Obviously, I enjoyed being a good swimmer because I was a surfer, and I wanted to stay on the team. So my parents' 25th anniversary, I said to my mom, I need to get a note, an excused absence, otherwise he's going to kick me off the team. So she wrote me a nice note, and when I went to school that day, I gave the note to the water polo coach, and I said, so I have to miss it, but it's an excused absence. Here's the note. And he says, oh, that's nice. Tell your parents I said, happy anniversary. He says, but I told you if you miss another practice, you're going to be off the team. And I said, well, no, but this is an excused absence. He goes, oh, no, it's fine. He goes, you go right ahead. It's an excused absence, but you're off the team. See the games that they play with kids? This is wicked. So I said to him, I looked him right in the eye. I was like, oh my gosh, you're a real slime. And maybe I shouldn't have said that, but he jumped out of his chair, grabbed me by the scruff of my neck, by the my Letterman's jacket where it would, maybe button closed right at the neck. And he had both hands and he started punching me in the chin. You're not going to call me names. And he punched me like 3 times in the chin from up, like an uppercut, because he was holding on to my Letterman's jacket. And he shoved me up against the chain link fence. I couldn't believe what was happening to me. But I thought, I know my dad's got my back. And I have an excused absence. This man is punching me. And of course, my dad taught me if anybody ever has you in an uncompromising position, take your thumbs and gouge out their eyeballs. And so I stuck my thumbs right in that guy's eyes. And he let go of me. And then I ran out the fence and I closed the gate and I locked the gate. And he cleared his eyes and he got to where he could see again. And he ran over to the gate and he started shaking the gate. And he says, I'm going to get you. And I said, you're not going to get anything but in trouble because you punched me. And I said, everybody saw it. And of course, he couldn't get me because there was barbed wire on the fence, so he couldn't even get over. So I slowly walked away, I thought, that I'm done with this guy. I went to the principal's office. The principal said, oh, no. He says, because I told him I stuck my thumbs right in his eyes because he punched me. He says, oh, you might be suspended for this. I couldn't believe the injustice in the world. So there's where I quit school. I thought to myself, that's enough for me. That's enough for me. But you have to know that in the end, if you do what is right in your life, and you know that God is watching your actions, God will have your back. And it may not be what you think. You may have to lose that job. You may have to quit school. You may have to suffer for a few moments. But you've got to keep strong in your faith because you've got to stand up for what is right, for justice, for what is right in your life. Not just because peer pressure says this or the other kids will say that. Because I remember I went back to school to say goodbye to all my friends the next day. And all my friends betrayed me. They said, you're a fool for doing what you're doing. You're on the varsity team. Just go apologize to him. They wanted me to apologize to him. And I thought, nope, I'm not going to. I'm done. Injustice is everywhere in this world. It's going to happen to you, and it'll give you an opportunity. It'll give you an opportunity to do what you're supposed to do in your life. What is that? And only you know that in that moment. And only you will know if you dealt with it correctly or incorrectly. And then you'll have another opportunity. Whether you dealt with it incorrectly or correctly, you're going to have plenty of opportunities. This is God's testing ground for all of us. It really is. This is God's boot camp, you might say. All of us have our chances and opportunities every day to do the right thing, to make the right choices.
What I'm seeing is the opportunities. If you look at life differently, your failures that you used to fail on are your opportunities today, not to fail. And that's where you grow, is being able to see where you fail and just see the failure.
I was thinking that is good that you did all this because you are standing up for what is right, number one, and you're not letting the authorities of hell come through. So I'm glad you did that.
It was very painful and it was very scary, but I had my dad, who you all know, who I knew had my back. Now, at this stage of my life, I know that my Father in heaven has my back. And so I am really not afraid of anything, not even death.
It's just like the people that won't take the vaccine and that are losing their jobs. They're fighting for what's right.
And God will help you, that's right. And a friend of mine said, I have a person who's in the aerospace industry and they're losing a $93,000 a year job. I said, well, okay. And she goes, that is commitment. I said, it is. I said, and maybe if they kept that job, they may have had a heart attack in 6 months or God knows what, and God knows what's right for that person in that moment of time. And maybe they'll change their life and recommit in another way. And all things work together for good for those that love the Lord, is what it boils down to.
I was thinking about what you said about the education system and how it discourages young people. I think you said something along that line. I was remembering what a torment it was to sit in math class. And yet, as an adult, when I became interested in electronics, all of a sudden I had a reason to learn math, like Ohm's Law, for example. And I said, this is great. I love this. And I thought, has somebody set me on the right path at a young age? I probably could have had a totally different destination. But I remember the other problem was that sometimes you'd have a teacher that didn't take the time to really explain something to you. And so you get overwhelmed and discouraged, and then all of a sudden you'd feel like, I'm not going to get this, so I'm not going to ask any more questions because I'm stupid. When you don't realize it, just that one teacher didn't take the time, that extra 5 minutes maybe, to take you through the fundamentals. And it seems like today's school system is trying to push everybody into this mold. And when I look at all these homeless people out there today, I'm thinking, you know what? I bet you there was a time in their life if somebody had come along, given them something to feed their passion. Who knows where they might have gone.
I had a teacher, after I left that 7th grade class, I went to another school. And as Dave was talking there, it occurred to me I had such a teacher that cared enough to go the extra mile. And where I had experienced a teacher that wanted to take my innocence, I had another teacher that wanted to build my character. It was in a class, I can't even remember what class, maybe it was history or civics or I don't know what it was, but I remembered his name. His name was Keith Crosscarry. And he actually took the trip from Ojai, California down to Ventura, which is about 30 miles, to meet with my parents because they were going to have a field trip. And I said, my dad would never let me go on a field trip. And he says, I want to speak to your father because we want you to go with us. It would be really good for you. This is the difference between a teacher that wants to build you up instead of one that wants to tear you down. And so he went and he had a meeting with my father at our house, which I thought was so weird. Here's my teacher at my house. Doesn't happen. And he talked to my dad, I don't know what they talked about, for probably an hour. And he came over to me after they were done and he says, your dad says you can go. And my dad, I looked at my dad and he shook his head, yes. And I thought, isn't that sweet that my dad gave him permission? He put his faith in that teacher to take his son out into the world. Such a rare thing because you know how my dad is. And even after my bad experience, my dad wasn't bittered because he doesn't judge people. He doesn't judge the whole situation. He deals with it one person, one situation at a time. That's how we all have to be. Don't judge the whole system because the majority of it is bad. If you find that your kids are in a good school, because maybe it's a small community and the teachers care and you have found that to be true, then don't just pull your kids out of school because we said, pull your kids out of school. No, you have to discern what is right for your children where you're living today in the situation at hand right now. I had a good teacher, and I'm a changed person because that guy cared about me enough to take me off into the world. The story is actually kind of interesting because when I went on this field trip, which was to the Grand Canyon, okay, from Southern California out to Arizona to the Grand Canyon, I met some people that were selling Indian jewelry. And I took their business card. So because of that trip, I actually ended up buying and selling Indian jewelry and making jewelry with my sister Diane, who was taking a silversmithing class. And so I ended up buying jewelry from these people that I met on that trip, which again changed my life because I made a bunch of money at 13, 14, 15 years old to where I had money as a young boy to start buying and selling things, bicycles and motorcycles and then cars. And see how one person has a ripple effect into your whole life? Like Dave just said, that if you were to be able to come in contact with one person that actually cared, that man, Keith Cross Carey, actually cared about each one of his students. At least he cared about me. And I thank him for that.
So we hear all these stories and these people that have offended us, or we feel like, especially when we're children, they do wrong things to us. We're supposed to forgive these people. Even now, we find ourselves, a lot of people hanging on to things that happened many, 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 many years ago. But we're called to forgive that person because it's not the person, right? It's the action or whatever that spirit about that person was doing. We were talking about authorities and the wickedness going on in the world. I love this passage, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood. So we're not supposed to be wrestling amongst ourselves because it's not what it is. It says, but against the principalities, against powers, and against the worldly authorities, the priests of the darkness in this world, against spiritual wickedness which are in high places. So this world is being governed by the adversary right now. And we see that very, very clear today by the people that are in so-called power, or the authorities, are wicked. And it goes down to a spiritual thing. So we're not even supposed to forgive them because they are being deceived as well. So that even becomes a greater task to growing closer to our Father.
I would say that's true. And it's funny, I remember Mr. Peterson. I can still remember his face. He had a big mustache, big tall guy. And I don't feel hatred for him. I recognize the wrong that came through him. And you and I were having a conversation just the other day about making a promise. And a lot of us, we promise this and we promise that, and I promised to do this. And then you get to a point in your life where you go, well, I can't do this anymore because I realized when I made that promise to that other person, I thought one thing, and now they're going to think that I'm a liar or I'm not a man of my word or a person of my word. But I can see now that something has changed. The circumstances have changed. I was deceived by this person when I made this promise. And Bo tells me a story about how he promised to hurt somebody if he ever. You want to tell that story? Because
Sure. It's real quick. In college, I was dating a woman, and she cheated on me with my best friend at the time. And I made a promise to him, and I was very sincere in my promise that if I did see him ever again, that he would never leave a vegetable state. And 6 months later, I saw him, and I saw the fear in his eyes, but I just gave him a big hug and told him I love him. So I broke that promise, but it was love that broke that promise, not wrath, not rage, because the rage is what I was experiencing. And rage is very much different than anger. So anger, the Hebrew 7 words for anger, one of them is to restore justice, righteousness. It's a hot feeling, an act of passion, is not to confuse. So we hear anger, and I think most people think rage. They think that spirit of anger or rage or whatnot. But according to what God's anger is just something that's not in harmony. It's out of justice. It's against His will, and it's an act of restoring justice. Is restoring things back to their Father, redeeming them, is what. It's that passion we feel when we see something that's so-called wrong. We feel something inside, or something inside of us tells us that this is wrong. This is unjust. But that easily can go into wrath or easily can go into rage if we would let it, I believe.
So about a year ago, I think I had a couple of words God left with me, and one is justice. I do believe that we are going to see, again, we're going to see some of hell on earth, but I think we'll also see justice at some point. But there's going to be some pretty scorched earth, just like there was in Sodom and Gomorrah. Another friend of ours, by the way, made a promise to some people, and this person said, but I made this promise. But see, when you wake up and you recognize that you have made a promise that you can't keep and still honor what you know is right in your heart, you can't be made by the devil to be honest and honorable in that moment. The devil will use that saying, oh, you have to keep your word. But the reality is there's also another way of looking at it and saying, you know what? I've changed my mind. I'm sorry I'm unable to keep my word in this situation because I know more today about the whole situation than I knew then. So I apologize. I have to not keep my word. I think that that's fair because sometimes we get caught up in situations where we realize, oh my gosh, I've really made a bad deal. I made a bad business deal. I sold a part of my business to a gentleman once upon a time. And I had to say, you know what? I need to buy you out because this is wrong. And just because I sold a part of my business, we made a deal, he paid the money, we had to go down this road a little while to recognize we are not compatible. There is something dark inside of this person. The light in me is not compatible with the dark in you. We must unwind this relationship. And so I said, I'm going to pay you back and you're going to go on your way. And we did. And it wasn't easy to pay the money back because a lot of the money had been spent by him to do all these improvements in my business, which were all kind of a big fat waste of money. But there's such a trick and game in the legal system, in the lawyers and all the things, because I'm having to deal with that constantly being in business. It is such amazing trickery. The legal system is amazing. Stay the heck out of it if you can. It's amazing. The only winner is the attorneys. It's very sad.
There's many people who have made a promise and sold their soul to the devil, but they can break that promise. All promises aren't good.
It's funny because we know that God has made us many promises, and the rainbow is one of the promises, and it gets perverted by the homosexuals trying to make the rainbow theirs.
The reason that it's good that the world is like that is that you have something to overcome. Otherwise, what would you do? I wonder what Adam and Eve did before the temptation. I mean, you know, they didn't have a tennis court or anything, you know.
Absolutely, I agree with that. Hang on.
I think Adam and Eve were experiencing what we'll receive when we leave this world. They'll just be in a state of awe and amazement and want to do nothing but solely worship with every atom that we exist of. I mean, I think it was just, everything was overwhelmingly beautiful to them, and they were just sitting there experiencing, not making this game, these choices in our heads. But yeah, it's easy to get caught up too and wonder what things used to be like or what things are going to be like instead of being present in the moment.
You learn more about situations sometimes when you're in the wrong place. You don't know who you can help at the time. And I've helped people, you know, in bad situations and got them out of trouble. And it's like, even though you're going down the wrong path, hanging down with the wrong friends, I've been able to intercede and, you know, help people. I was out at a restaurant and my friend was in the lounge and he had too much to drink. And I really didn't belong there. But I went in there and he came out, he was so drunk that he didn't know he was drunk. And I spent about an hour talking to him to get his keys away. But if I hadn't been there, he would have run into a telephone pole.
Can I get my keys back?
Yeah.
That was not me. Guys, thanks for coming. We have a new location for the foundation. It's in the same plaza. It is just called Unit A, 545 Northeast E Street, Unit A. So if you come, make sure you call the foundation, and we'll be doing the Sunday conversations from here and every so often at Tall Timber Ranch. And otherwise, we'll keep you posted. Thank you guys all for your contributions to keeping the foundation alive. See you next week.